The hum of the command deck was the sound of restraint. Machines waiting for orders, officers breathing too quietly, and a planet beneath them holding its breath. General Marcus Vale stood before the viewport, watching Earth drift in the black. It looked peaceful from orbit, unaware of the war crawling toward it. He had spent 30 years defending that blue sphere, and tonight he wondered if he had finally run out of tomorrows to give it. Behind him, consoles blinked, and officers murmured like anxious ghosts. "Transmission confirmed," said Commander Chun, her voice precise, professional, but threaded with unease. "The Tsar fleet is holding position on the lunar perimeter. Their flagship just hailed us. The king wants to speak." Vale didn't turn around. His reflection hovered over the planet like a second, wearier ghost. "Put him through." The lights dimmed as the projection expanded, swallowing the room in alien light. The Tsar King appeared, tall, scaled, and armored in gold that reflected stars. His voice filled the chamber, deep and resonant, the kind of sound that bent the air itself. "People of Earth," he began, "you have violated the sanctity of our dominion. Your fleets have trespassed into what is ours. You have 2 of your days to surrender and submit. Resist, and your world will be reduced to ash drifting on solar winds." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Even the machines seemed to still. Vale straightened, his expression unreadable. "You've crossed half the galaxy to threaten a single planet. You must think very little of us." The king tilted his head, the motion almost human. "We think of you as what you are, fragile, temporary loud. Every species that fought us has vanished into the dust of history. You will be no different." Behind Vale, Chin's fingers tightened on her console. The room smelled faintly of ozone and tension. Vale stepped closer to the projection, close enough that the light painted harsh lines across his face. "You've mistaken us," he said quietly. The king's eyes narrowed, molten gold and cold fury. "Do enlighten me." "You see endurance as weakness," Vale replied. "But you've never faced a species that survived its own planet trying to kill it." He let the words linger, his voice low but certain. "We've been burned, drowned, and frozen, and we're still here. You want us to surrender? You should have come before we learned how to fight gods." The alien's gaze sharpened. Around him, murmurs rose among his council of warlords, their voices overlapping in a hiss of disbelief. "You speak boldly for a doomed creature," the king said. "Perhaps you seek a glorious death." Vale allowed himself the faintest ghost of a smile. "You're assuming it's my death you'll be witnessing." The king's composure fractured for an instant, a ripple of irritation disturbing his regal stillness. 2 days, he said at last. "After that, your defiance will feed our sons." The image fractured into shards of light and vanished, leaving behind a silence so complete it rang in their ears. Chin exhaled shakily. "He means it, sir. Their fleet's large enough to vaporize every defense station we have." Vale's hand dropped to the arm of his chair. He sat slowly, the leather creaking beneath his weight. "Meaning it doesn't make it possible." Lieutenant Omar Reyes, young enough to still believe survival was a matter of math, turned from his monitor. "Sir, with respect, their weapons outclass ours by decades. Even if we mobilize every ship, then we make decades disappear in 2 days," Vale said. His tone wasn't loud, but it cut cleanly through the room. "Start running simulations. I want projections of every possible assault vector. If they think they can erase us, I want them to see what happens when humans refuse to vanish." Shin nodded, already relaying orders. Around the room, the staff moved faster, urgency replacing fear. Yet even as motion returned, an undercurrent of doubt rippled beneath it. The alien fleet was vast, their power undeniable. When the others had turned back to their tasks, Chin spoke again, quieter this time. "Sir, are you sure antagonizing them was the right call?" Vale rubbed his temple, staring out at the planet below. "If I hadn't, they would have smelled fear. And once a conqueror smells fear, negotiations end before they begin. Then what happens now?" "Now," he said, rising, "we make sure they regret giving us 48 hours. He walked to the viewport, resting a hand against the reinforced glass. Earth's cities glittered faintly, a fragile constellation of life clinging to the dark. For a moment, the sight steadied him. Every light represented someone worth fighting for. Millions of reasons that made surrender unthinkable. Reyes approached, holding a new report. General, the lunar defense grid is partially functional. We can patch together a perimeter, but it won't hold under sustained bombardment. Vale's eyes didn't leave the planet. It doesn't need to hold forever, just long enough for them to realize we won't break. Chun hesitated, and if they don't realize it, then we teach them. The room fell quiet again, the sound of the ship's engines whispering like a pulse through metal. Vale turned away from the stars, his voice calm but iron-bound. Initiate lockdown protocols. Every outpost, every ship, every civilian defense bunker. The next 48 hours belong to preparation. Yes, sir, Chun said. As she left to execute his orders, Vale remained alone for a moment longer. He thought of the king's expression, the calm certainty of an empire that had never been challenged. They had come to Earth expecting fear, obedience, submission. They would find none. He took a small metal case from his pocket and opened it. Inside lay an old, dented coin from the first Mars expedition, a relic of humanity's first step beyond home. He turned it over between his fingers, its worn edges grounding him. Every empire in history had thought humanity would bow. Every empire had been wrong. Vale slipped the coin back into his pocket and faced the command deck once more. The stars beyond the viewport seemed closer now, as if waiting. He didn't know how they would win, only that they would fight until nothing remained to give. 2 days, he murmured to himself. Let's see what eternity they think they own. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the moon, an empire prepared for conquest. But in orbit above a fragile blue world, a man had just promised resistance. And for the first time in the long history of the Tsar Dominion, a king's certainty had begun to crack. The war room of the Resolute pulsed with urgent light, red and amber indicators dancing across the walls as Earth's defense network came alive. It had been 8 hours since the ultimatum, and General Marcus Vale hadn't left his post. Sleep was a luxury no one could afford now. His reflection in the glass showed a man past his prime, but sharpened by conflict. Short hair, silvered at the temples, eyes dark with exhaustion and purpose. He watched the holographic map of Earth's orbit, where hundreds of fleet markers flickered like fireflies preparing for battle. Commander Imani Chun entered quietly, her uniform immaculate despite the chaos. Fleet Command has confirmed readiness at 72%, she reported, handing him a data slate. Mars outposts are evacuating non-essential personnel. We've received partial reinforcement from the Lunar Corps. Vale nodded. And the Tsar, they're repositioning. Surveillance shows multiple carrier formations near the moon's shadow. Their lead ship hasn't moved since the transmission. It's almost ceremonial, like they're daring us to attack first. Vale allowed himself a thin, humorless smile. Let them wait. The longer they stare at us, the more time we have to prepare. He set the slate down, scanning the hologram's shifting lines. What about Project Thanatos? Chun hesitated. Still unstable, sir. The physics team says activation could destabilize local gravity for kilometers if we use it near the planet. I know the risk, Vale interrupted, but if the alternative is extinction, I'll take unstable. He looked up. Give me Dr. Havelock. Moments later, the scientist appeared on a flickering feed. Her face was drawn, eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. General, the gravitic core is operational, but I can't guarantee containment. If we deploy Thanatos too close to the fleet, it could tear apart our own ships. How soon can you give me control? 6 hours, maybe less if nothing explodes in the meantime. She tried to smile and failed. It was never meant to be used, Marcus. It was a deterrent, not a weapon. Vale's voice softened for the first time that day. Everything's a weapon if the alternative is surrender. The feed cut, leaving a silence thick enough to feel. Across the room, Lieutenant Reyes was coordinating strike patterns with the orbital squadrons. His fingers danced across the console, eyes darting between incoming reports. General, multiple civilian networks are broadcasting the ultimatum. Public morale is dropping fast. Some cities are already evacuating underground. Vale walked to him, resting a hand on the lieutenant's shoulder. They'll need something to believe in, Reyes. Keep communications tight. No panic, no speculation. If they think we're standing firm, they'll stand too. Reyes nodded, jaw set. Understood, sir. When Vale turned back to the viewport, Earth rotated slowly beneath them. Vast, fragile, and achingly beautiful. Clouds spiraled over continents like strokes of white paint. Every war he had ever fought had been for something tangible. Territory, survival, duty. But this, he thought, this was for existence itself. The door slid open again. Chun returned, a faint sheen of sweat on her brow. All divisions are mobilizing. Ground defense stations are online. The Arcadia fleet is requesting final orders. Vale considered for a moment. Tell them to hold formation until my signal. No one fires until I say. He turned to the operations board. What's the alien composition? Chun brought up the data. 3 dreadnoughts, 15 carriers, nearly 100 war frigates. Their technology makes them faster, stronger, and shielded against conventional munitions. Vale's eyes lingered on the display. And yet they underestimate us. Chun frowned. Sir, they don't understand humanity, he said, voice quiet but certain. They think logic wins wars. But logic doesn't build revolutions. Fear doesn't forge courage. They think we'll crumble because every other species they met did. They don't understand we only fight harder when we're cornered. Chin said nothing, but something flickered in her eyes. Belief, faint but real. Hours passed in a blur of commands and preparation. The Resolute became a hive of motion. Engineers sealing bulkheads, pilots running diagnostics, technicians aligning rail cannons. Every corridor vibrated with urgency. Yet amid it all, Vale felt a strange calm, the kind that came before every battle he had survived. He stopped briefly in the observation deck, where Dr. Havelock was recalibrating the Corps' remote control array. The device pulsed within its containment field, a sphere of light bending space around it. You're pushing it too fast, she muttered, hands trembling as she adjusted the energy regulators. One wrong sequence, and we lose half the ship. Vale stepped beside her. You think it'll work? Havelock met his gaze. I think it'll destroy something. Whether that's them or us depends on timing. Then we'll get the timing right. She gave a tired laugh. That's what I like about soldiers. You always think control's a matter of timing. He didn't argue. They both knew what was at stake. By the 15th hour, the fleet hung poised at high orbit, a wall of steel and light stretching over the planet's curve. Messages poured in from across the system, short, clipped transmissions filled with resolve. Vale listened to each one without expression, storing their voices like fuel for what was coming. Reyes approached him quietly. General, there's a request from Ground Command. They're asking for a statement to broadcast planet-wide. Vale hesitated, then nodded. Patch it through. The screen before him flickered, revealing millions of listening frequencies, civilian, military, underground, orbital. He could almost feel the weight of their fear pressing through the signal. This is General Marcus Vale, he began. His voice was steady, measured. You've all heard their demand. You know what they want. They think humanity will kneel, that we'll surrender because the odds say we should. But they've miscalculated. We've spent our entire history surviving things we weren't supposed to. Every empire that tried to break us learned that we don't yield. We endure. We fight. He paused, letting the words breathe. So if you're scared, good. Fear means you're alive. And as long as you're alive, you're part of the fight. Stay with us. The next 2 days decide everything. He ended the transmission and stood silently for a moment, the echo of his own voice lingering in the air. Chin spoke softly beside him. That was good, sir. Vale's gaze remained fixed on the stars. Let's hope it's enough. Outside the viewport, the enemy fleet began to shift, an ocean of lights moving into attack formation. The countdown had reached its final hours. Vale straightened his uniform, his reflection merging with the distant glint of alien ships. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "Prepare for contact." Chen hesitated. "They'll strike first, won't they?" "Probably," Vale said. "But that's fine." His eyes were cold, calm, and certain. "We only need 2 seconds." The first shot came without warning. A beam of violet energy slicing through the black, tearing a human cruiser in half. The explosion bloomed silently in the void, its light reflecting in General Marcus Vale's eyes as the Resolute shuddered from the impact wave. The alien armada had begun its assault. Around him, officers shouted coordinates and firing solutions, their voices merging into a single rhythm of survival. Vale stood at the center, unmoving, his hands clasped behind his back as though the storm outside were a matter of weather, not annihilation. "Shields holding at 68%, Commander Chun called, gripping the console. "The Tsar are pushing through the upper flank. 5 carriers inbound. Redirect orbital guns to Sector 9, Vale ordered. "Focus fire on their engines. If we can slow them, we might create an opening." Outside, the night became a canvas of fury. Human rail cannons traced silver lines across the void, each shot followed by the blinding flare of plasma counterfire. Frigates dove and twisted, their hulls burning as they struck at ships 10 times their size. The void was filled with dying light, fragments of steel, and the fading echo of voices cut short. Vale's voice remained calm through the chaos. "Reyes, status on Project Thanatos." "Dr. Havelock reports it's ready, sir," Reyes answered, wiping sweat from his brow. "But she says there's still instability in the core. If we trigger it now, it could collapse half our fleet along with theirs." Vale didn't hesitate. "Give me Havelock." The scientist's face flickered onto the comms display, lit by the pulsing glow of the device behind her. "Marcus, I hope you're not calling to say you're using it now." "I'm saying we're out of time," Vale replied. "If we wait, there won't be anyone left to use it." "Then you'd better aim perfectly," she said, her voice shaking despite her attempt at composure. "Once the core breaches containment, there's no undoing it." "Understood." Vale cut the feed and turned to Chun. "Plot coordinates for detonation near their lead carrier. We'll end this in one move." Chun hesitated. "Sir, that ship. Our scans say the king is aboard." "Exactly." Vale's tone was flat, final. "Let's kill their god and see how divine they feel after." Reyes looked up from his station. "General, the forward batteries are at critical heat. If we fire again, we'll lose hull integrity." "Then don't miss," Vale said. The deck vibrated as the Resolute banked hard, its massive thrusters straining against inertia. The king's fleet loomed ahead, a fortress of golden hulls and living energy, each vessel pulsing with its own heartbeat. Vale's eyes narrowed as he spotted the flagship, a black spire framed by burning light. The moment it came into range, he gave the order. "Fire, Thanatos." Dr. Havelock's voice crackled through the comms. "Core breach in 3, 2, 1. The world went white. A sphere of blinding gravity tore into existence, bending the stars around it. Space screamed as light itself folded inward, devouring everything caught within its pull. The leading alien carriers vanished in seconds, ripped apart and dragged into the singularity. Shockwaves rolled through the void, rattling even the distant ships. Chun shielded her eyes from the flare. Direct hits confirmed. Multiple enemy vessels destroyed. Wait, readings are spiking. The field's expanding. Vale gripped the railing as alarms erupted across the bridge. "All ships pull back. Full reverse thrusters." Through the viewport, he saw the Tsar flagship struggling to escape, its hull fracturing under the gravitational strain. The king's image briefly flickered onto the comms, a distorted visage filled with fury and disbelief. "You would destroy your own world to spite us?" he roared. Vale stared back, unflinching. "No, to save it." The connection died as the singularity consumed the alien ship, the shockwave cascading outward in a final burst of light. Then silence. The void dimmed. What remained of the enemy fleet drifted, broken and burning. "Reading clear," Chun said after a long pause. Her voice trembled. Their flagship is gone. The rest, they're retreating. Reyes slumped into his chair, laughter mixing with disbelief. We did it. The ship jolted violently, cutting him off. The Resolute's systems flickered, damaged by the energy backlash. Sparks showered from the ceiling as conduits overloaded. Vale steadied himself against the console, scanning the damage reports. Casualty count. High, Chin said quietly. Half the fleet is offline. We've lost contact with the Europa battalion. Vale's throat tightened. Victory, he thought, always came at a price. Dr. Havelock's exhausted voice returned over the comms. Thanatos is spent. The core's gone. But it worked, Marcus. The Tsar fleet is shattered. Then rest, he said. You've earned it. She gave a faint, weary chuckle. You too, General. As the call ended, Vale turned toward the viewport. The earth glowed below, scarred but alive. Fires dotted the atmosphere where fragments had fallen, but the world still turned, stubborn as ever. Reyes approached, voice softer now. Sir, what do we tell command? Tell them it's over, Vale said. He hesitated, then added, for now. Chun joined them, her uniform torn, her expression caught between triumph and sorrow. You think they'll come back? They always do, Vale said, lighting a new cigar with hands that no longer trembled. But next time, they'll remember what 2 seconds cost them. He watched the smoke drift toward the ceiling, curling in lazy spirals. Around them, the surviving ships moved into formation, tending to the wounded and collecting the wreckage of comrades. In the silence that followed, there was no celebration, only the quiet relief of the living. Below, on Earth's surface, people emerged from shelters to see the sky streaked with burning trails. They didn't know how close they had come to extinction, only that the dawn had returned. Vale remained at the window, the reflection of the sunrise washing over his face. He could hear faint cheers over the comms, ground crews confirming the retreat, families calling names through static. Humanity had survived again, defiant and scarred, just as it always had. Reyes spoke one last time, almost in a whisper. General, your orders? Vale's eyes stayed on the horizon. We rebuild, he said simply. We always rebuild. The Resolute drifted in the quiet aftermath, her hull scorched, her engines flickering like a tired heart. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, indifferent but vast, and for the first time in 2 days, Vale allowed himself to breathe. Somewhere beyond those stars, another war was already being planned. But for this moment, humanity had earned peace, fragile, fleeting, and fiercely won. Vale closed his eyes and whispered to the silence. 2 seconds.